Hello everyone, welcome to Zigmatech Consult Limited Learning Hub. I'll be taking you on agricultural science. Some of you might have visited some farms where crops are grown or animals are reared, and you might have noticed that the farmer grew a few crops or reared a few animals, or you might also have noticed that he grew so many crops or reared so many animals. Now, what type of farming system do you think either of these farmers was engaged in? We will get to know more about this in this topic, subsistence and commercial agriculture. So our topic for today is the meaning and differences between subsistence and commercial agriculture. Now, by the end of this lesson, you should be able to state the meaning of subsistence and commercial agriculture. You should also be able to differentiate between subsistence and commercial agriculture. And you should also be able to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of subsistence and commercial agriculture. And finally, you should be able to highlight the problems of subsistence and commercial agriculture. Let's start with the meaning of subsistence agriculture. Now, what is subsistence agriculture? Subsistence agriculture is a type of agriculture which is concerned with the production of food by a farmer to feed himself and his family. So that's what subsistence agriculture is about. The farmer just has to produce food in order to feed himself and his family. Let's also take a look at the meaning of commercial agriculture. Commercial agriculture can be defined as a type of agriculture which is concerned with the production of animals, food crops, cash crops in large quantity for sale. So here the farmer is concerned with selling of his produce, not for family consumption now. The target here is to sell his farm produce. Let's take a look at the differences between subsistence agriculture and commercial agriculture. The first difference we have between the subsistence and commercial agriculture is that the subsistence agriculture requires a small area of land for cultivation, while the commercial agriculture requires a large area of land for cultivation. Subsistence agriculture is also mainly produced for family consumption, as based on the definition as I stated earlier on that the subsistence agriculture is just for the farmer's consumption. So one of the differences between subsistence and commercial agriculture is that subsistence agriculture produces food mainly for family consumption, while commercial agriculture involves the cultivation or the production of food for sale or for exportation. Another difference between subsistence agriculture and commercial agriculture has to do with the tools or the equipment used or machineries used in the course of cultivation. For subsistence agriculture, crude tools are used or crude implements are used, and examples of such crude tools or implements are like the hoe, the cutlass, the machetes, which are just simple tools that are used because, remember, we said it involves a small scale of land. But for commercial agriculture, complex and modern tools and implements are used. Farm machineries are used, like tractors are used. The combine harvester is also used. These are some machines that are involved in the cultivation by farmers who are involved in commercial agriculture. We also have another difference between subsistence and commercial agriculture as regards the skills or the labor that is used while being engaged in subsistence agriculture. For subsistence agriculture, the family is usually used to carry out labor or to carry out the activities on the farm. So the family labor is used and they are usually unskilled. While for commercial agriculture, we have skilled labor that is used or paid or hired labor. is involved in commercial agriculture. We also have the yield or returns as another means to distinguish between subsistence agriculture and commercial agriculture. For the subsistence agriculture, the yields or the returns are usually low, while for commercial agriculture, the yields or the returns are usually high. Now, you should be able to understand that the reason why the yields or the returns are high or low in terms of subsistence and commercial agriculture, remember the land used in subsistence agriculture is usually small, while that for the commercial agriculture is usually large. So this will definitely affect the output or the yield gotten from the farm. So take note of this. Subsistence agriculture, the yield is usually low, while for commercial agriculture, the yield is usually high. Let's take a look at another difference. We have little capital investment as regards subsistence agriculture. So subsistence agriculture requires just little capital investment. Remember, everything used seems to be at a little stage. For example, the farmland is small, the equipment used are crude equipment, so the hoe, the cutlasses, and some of those farm implements are cheap and affordable, so they are not expensive. So the farmer doesn't require so much money to get involved in subsistence agriculture. But for commercial agriculture, which requires a very large expanse of land, which involves machineries and hired labor, you'll find out that this will require a lot of money for the farmer to get involved in. So one major difference between subsistence agriculture and commercial agriculture is that subsistence agriculture requires little capital investment, while commercial agriculture requires a large capital investment. Another difference between subsistence agriculture and commercial agriculture has to do with storage facilities. For subsistence agriculture, the farmer doesn't really need storage facilities. Just simple devices can be used to store the farm produce. Remember, the aim of subsistence agriculture is for consumption by the family. So the farmer doesn't really need to store his farm produce. But for commercial agriculture, which involves a very large scale of production, the farmer needs to store his farm produce. Remember, commercial agriculture has to do with the production of food on a large scale for exportation or for sale. And since the quantity is really large, he needs to store quite a lot for future use. So the difference between subsistence and commercial agriculture is that subsistence agriculture there's no need for food storage or for storage, while commercial agriculture requires processing facilities and also storage facilities. Now, commercial agriculture is also practiced by rich farmers, and while subsistence agriculture is practiced by peasant farmers, rural farmers, So that's another difference between subsistence agriculture and commercial agriculture. Subsistence agriculture is practiced by peasant farmers, rural farmers, those that are not so learned or educated, while commercial farmers agriculture is practiced by the rich, those that really have money, the capital to engage in commercial agriculture. Another difference between subsistence agriculture and commercial agriculture has to do with the chemicals that are used in the course of production. For subsistence agriculture, the farmer does not make use of agrochemicals like pesticides, insecticides to control pests and insects, or weedicides to control weeds. But for commercial agriculture, the farmer needs to make use of these agrochemicals, which he needs to help control pests and diseases on the farm, also to control weeds on the farm. The farmer also who engages in subsistence agriculture does engage in what is called mixed cropping system. So here the subsistence farmer usually cultivates different crops. For example, he will mix up, he will grow a leguminous crop like cowpea together with maize crop and some other crops. So that's what the subsistence farmer or agriculturist usually gets involved in. While the commercial farmer or the farmer involved in commercial agriculture usually cultivates just a single crop. So that's another key difference between subsistence agriculture. So subsistence agriculture, the farmer gets involved in mixed cropping, while for commercial agriculture, the farmer just gets involved in monocropping. And what is that monocropping? The farmer just grows a single crop, which is also called sole cropping. Let's take a look at the advantages of subsistence agriculture. After this, we'll also look at the disadvantages too of subsistence agriculture, and we'll also look at the advantages and disadvantages of commercial agriculture. But starting with subsistence farming, what are the advantages of subsistence farming? One of the advantages is that subsistence agriculture requires a small area of land. So you can see it's easy for a farmer to get involved in subsistence agriculture because it requires a small area of land. And we know that land is expensive, so that's an advantage for subsistence farming. Subsistence agriculture also does not require hired labor. So you can see that the labor involved in subsistence agriculture is free. The family members are the ones that usually get involved in subsistence agriculture. So the farmer does not have to spend money in paying people to come and cultivate his farmland. Subsistence agriculture also has this as an advantage, whereby it depends on the natural rain to be able to water the crops. So there's no need for irrigation facilities, which are usually expensive. So it's called rain-fed agriculture. The farmer just depends on the natural rain to be able to water his crops. That's another advantage of subsistence farming. Now, in subsistence agriculture, money is not spent on agrochemicals like fertilizers. The subsistence farmer just grows his crops basically, not using chemicals or chemical fertilizers. If he has some animals, he could make use of the droppings from the animal farm to fertilize his crops. So that's another advantage of subsistence agriculture. Now, subsistence agriculture is also cheap to practice. Remember when we looked at the differences between subsistence and commercial agriculture, I mentioned earlier that the farmer does not make use of sophisticated tools. He just makes use of simple, crude tools. He also makes use of a small piece of land. He makes use of family labor. So all of these are advantages in the sense that it makes subsistence agriculture cheap to practice. As subsistence agriculture has its advantages, it also has its disadvantages. So let's take a look at some of the disadvantages of subsistence farming. The first we have here is that the produce is low. In subsistence agriculture, the output is usually low. And what's the reason behind this? Remember, subsistence agriculture involves a small piece of land. It involves the use of crude tools and equipment or implements. It also does not make use of chemicals which help to control pests and diseases and to control weeds. So all of these in turn will affect the output gotten from subsistence farming. So the output is usually low as a result of those factors I just mentioned earlier. Now, crude implements cannot cultivate large area of land. When you make use of crude implements, if I should ask you a question, comparing using a simple hoe or to make ridges or to carry out some farming practices and using a machine to carry out farming practices, which one do you think will be able to cultivate or be more efficient or effective? Definitely it has to do with the machines. So if you use crude implements, that's a disadvantage in terms of subsistence agriculture, which makes use of crude implements. So with crude implements, you cannot cultivate a large area of land. That's another disadvantage of subsistence agriculture. Another disadvantage of subsistence agriculture has to do with the level of education of the farmers involved. So you can see that farmers involved in subsistence agriculture are usually not educated, and as a result of this poses a limitation on their ability to really generate or thrive very well in the production of either their crops or animals. So they usually lack innovation. They don't know what to do in order to step up their level of production due to the fact that they are not educated. So when new innovations are discovered or better production techniques are discovered by the research institute, these farmers are not educated, so they cannot implement such innovations. That's another major disadvantage of subsistence farming. Now, there's also usually no surplus for sale in subsistence agriculture because the farmer just produces basically for himself and his family with very little, if at all, for sale. So basically, he just produces for his family. So subsistence agriculture does not make provision for surplus to sell, for sale, and that's not a good aspect in terms of subsistence farming. So that's a disadvantage because it's not everybody that's involved in agriculture. They have different sectors of the economy. So a farmer needs to produce enough to feed himself and also to feed the nation at large, and even to export to help the GDP of any country or the country that they're located in. So subsistence agriculture, the farmer does not have surplus for sale. Subsistence agriculture, we also have a problem there where pests and diseases are not usually controlled in subsistence agriculture. Remember, I said earlier on that the farmer does not make use of agrochemicals. So he's faced with a lot of attacks from pests and diseases. Let's take a look at the advantages of commercial agriculture. In commercial agriculture, the output is usually high. Based on the scale of production, you can see that the output is usually high. You can also see that in commercial agriculture, the farmer yields profit because he's basically there into production for the purpose of selling. So he makes profit as a result of engaging in commercial agriculture. And commercial agriculture also creates employment opportunities because because of the scale of production, the farmer needs to get people involved. You understand? So skilled labor, remember we said it has to do with hired labor or skilled labor. So that serves as a means of providing employment opportunities for other people to get involved in farming. Now, there's also great efficiency in commercial agriculture. What does the precision, the farmer is able to achieve set targets and do exploit in terms of commercial agriculture because of the machines that are used that are involved in commercial agriculture. And commercial agriculture also involves, remember I said it involves the use of agrochemicals. So there's control of pests and diseases as regards commercial agriculture, which is usually very effective. And this is effective because the farmer makes use of chemicals, insecticides, pesticides to control pests attacks on his farm, which has a very drastic effect on the output or the yield of any farm, because this pest and disease can cause a lot of economic losses to the farmer. Let's take a look at the disadvantages of commercial agriculture. Commercial agriculture is costly to practice. And why is it costly to practice? Because machines are usually expensive to purchase. They run into millions. And the farmer needs different kinds of machines to operate on his farm on a commercial level. So that's a disadvantage. Commercial agriculture also requires skilled labor. That is what is basically used in commercial agriculture, and that could serve as a disadvantage too, because that could also affect cost of production. Commercial agriculture also requires a marketing channel for the sale of the produce, because the farmer is producing on a large scale, and so he needs to have a good marketing channel in order to sell his produce so that he doesn't run into losses. Commercial agriculture, labor is usually hired. That's another disadvantage, because that could also influence the cost of production as regards commercial agriculture. Now, the use of equipment can also cause what is called erosion, soil erosion, because these equipments are heavy, these machines are heavy, and as they are carrying out their activities on the farm, they compress the soil, and that compaction can now lead to erosion. So that's another disadvantage of commercial agriculture. It could also lead to the displacement of small-scale farmers from their lands, because those that have the money is practiced by the rich. They can influence decisions and use their money to purchase land and displace small-scale farmers. That's another major disadvantage of commercial agriculture. Let's take a look at the problems of subsistence agriculture. Now, the use of crude tools leads to low productivity. That's a major problem in subsistence agriculture. Crude tools leads to low productivity. Unskilled labor lacks innovation. They are not able to, since they are not educated and skilled, they don't know how to tackle problems and situations they encounter in the course of their production. Now, family labor is also inefficient for high productivity. The farmer just has a small family size. How is he able to engage them if he wants to increase his level of production? So family labor is usually inefficient for high productivity. Natural rainfall fails sometimes. There are times we have some climate changes where there's a decline in the rainfall, and this could also lead to low productivity. Small farm holding also yields small produce. When you have a small farm size, definitely the output will usually be small. Let's take a look at the problems of commercial agriculture. Commercial agriculture is usually capital expensive, as I stated earlier, because of the equipment that are used and the size of the farmland involved. This can influence the cost of production. So commercial agriculture is usually highly capital intensive. Now, commercial agriculture is also inadequate in the sense that commercial agriculture has to do with improved varieties of crops and animals in order to really get a very high yield. And once this is inadequate, it also poses a problem in commercial agriculture. So they are not improved varieties of crops and animals, and this could also affect the level of production. High cost of machinery, high cost of spare parts too is another problem in commercial agriculture. These machines are expensive, the spare parts are also expensive too. Then there's also the lack of technical know-how. You need to have basic knowledge on how to operate these farm machines, and that's another problem of commercial agriculture. So far in this lesson, we discussed about the meaning of subsistence agriculture, which is a type of agriculture that is concerned with the production of food by a farmer to feed himself and his family. And we also looked at commercial agriculture, and we defined it as a type of agriculture which is concerned with the production of food, animals, cash crops in large quantity and for sale. Okay, as we've come to the conclusion of this topic, but before we conclude finally, I would like us to practice some questions. For those of you that will be taking your JAMB or SSCE, you need to expose yourself to enough questions so that you can gain mastery of the topic that you have been taught. And in order to do this, I want to introduce you to what is called the Examguide, and I will also guide you how to make use of the Examguide so that you can expose yourself to many questions as possible. And first and foremost, you click on the practice for UTME. You now see a list of subjects. You now select the subject of interest, and our subject of interest here is agriculture. You also go and select the year that you want to practice. So I've selected a year. And you select the number of questions you also want to practice to. So I've selected that. Then we need to select the topic. So come in here, I will unselect all and now select the particular topic I need to, or aspect that we need to expose ourselves to questions. So we have what's called the general agriculture. You click OK and we'll now get started. Okay, now here we have a list of questions. I will now be specific to go through questions that are in line with the topic that I just taught you. So we have a question here which says, subsistence agriculture is characterized by A, intensive use of inputs, B, use of machines, C, large-scale production, D, small farm holdings. The question again says subsistence agriculture, which has to do with a low level of production where the farmer produces for himself and his family, is characterized by A, intensive use of inputs. Nope, that has to do with commercial agriculture. Use of machines, no, that has to do with commercial agriculture. Large-scale production, that also has to do with commercial agriculture. Then the last option we have there is small farm holdings. Yes, that's the correct answer. That's the characteristics of subsistence agriculture. So the answer is D. So I click D. Then we move to the next question that also has to do with the topic we just learned. And the question says, output is higher in commercial agriculture because of the following reasons, except, take note of the word except. Now, A option says employment of large labor force. So they're asking the reason why output is higher in commercial agriculture. They have given us the reasons, but one of them, the reasons here, is not the correct answer. It's not a reason why it is high. So we have employment of large labor force. Is that a reason why commercial agriculture, the output is high? We also have cultivation of large hectares of land. Is that a reason why commercial output in commercial agriculture is high? Yes, that's a reason. It involves cultivation of large hectares of land, so it will definitely lead to a high output. Next option is adequate finance. It involves adequate finance, so that could also lead to a high output. It also involves the utilization of complex farm machineries. That's another reason why output is high. But employment of large labor force, no. Rather, it's employment of skilled labor, hired labor, and not large labor force. So the answer is A. So let's take a look at another question. We have the main source of power for subsistence agriculture is. So what's the main source of power that is used by a farmer who is involved in subsistence agriculture? We have animals, A option, B option, machines, no, which is used by commercial agriculture. C option, electricity, no. D option, man. Remember, they said the main source. They did not just say the source of power, the main source. Animals are also used in subsistence agriculture, but the main source here is man. So the answer is D. So you can see that practicing these questions helps us to gain mastery over the topic that we've just learned. So I will encourage you to always go through the exam guide after you've been taught, or to expose yourself to many more questions. Thank you very much for listening.